Hello again. So we're making a Spartan warrior and we're on to the last stage in this episode, which is painting the glossy or roughness in this case. So there's my roughness, and at the moment it's all a consistent roughness of somewhere near 0.46. So if I increase the roughness, it does it uniformly and it looks very plasticky, and if I decrease the roughness, you can see it uniformly looks rough. So there's two things I want to do. I need to, on the metallic, let's just pull it across to metallic for now, and you can see how everything changes that bit, and if I bring it back, it looks more sort of plasticky. So what I'll need to do is I'll need to tell the principled shader which bits are metallic and which bits aren't. And that's quite simple. That's with a black and white texture. So you color the bits in white that are metallic and the other bits black. The other thing we need to do is an input to the roughness. We need some bits shiny, like the metal we want fairly shiny. The skin we want different shininess, maybe the leather straps, but the trunks and maybe the sandals are going to be a bit more rough. So we need to tell Blender which bits we want rough and which bits we want shiny. So let's start off with a metallic. I'll change this to the UV image editor and I'll create a new texture. And I'll call this Warrior Metallic. I'm going to keep it 1024 by 1024 because it doesn't need to be that detailed. Take the alpha off and press OK. So because it's black, that means I don't need to paint in the bits that are skin or leather, but I do need to paint in the metal and the sort of armor bits and the belt buckle. So let's go across to texture paint mode. And did you see this image change just then? That's because it thinks I'm using this image here and it thinks that's selected. So what I need to do is duplicate this one and change it to my Warrior Metallic. Just select it. And if you have this problem, you need to go back into edit mode. There we go, and it changes back, and then back into paint mode. Edit mode seems to let Blender know what texture is active. It should be the case that whatever you have selected, but sometimes you need to go back into edit mode and back out again to set it up. Also, what I'm going to do is hook it into the base color. That way I'll have my normal map to guide me still. Because it's all black, it's just coming out black at the moment. I'm going into my base color, not the metallic. I just want to know which bits I'm going to make black and white for the moment, then I'll put it across into metallic in a second. So we're still on paint mode, but I'm going to go back into material mode and then start painting these bits in. Now I can use my link selection, so this button down here, which is already ticked, so I can press A to deselect all, and then over the top press L to get these linked areas. That's great. Let's just make sure I've got them all, and then come across to my fill brush and fill them all in white. Oh, I'm on multiply still. So change that to mix, and I accidentally clicked the use gradient as well. That's a bit confusing. But I've just put it up to white, got rid of the use gradient and put it to mix. I might as well put the strength up to 1 and bam. There we are. Now it's telling Blender that that should all be metallic. There must be a tiny bit of an overlap seam there, but that's not going to make any difference. And the only other bit I need to actually paint in is these bits along here, I believe. I'll just put the color back in and see where that is. So it goes up to this line here. That's a bit awkward. So I'm going to put this into a mix node just so I can see the two. Color, mix RGB, and just put them both in so I can just see where I'm painting. And then on this one, the metallic, go back to my normal brush, which is the texture drawer. Just check it's on mix. I'm just going to sample the white, that'd be the easy way. And then click on the white. So S to sample. I'm going to put mirror on as well, that'll make things easier. And let's zoom right in here. Shift space bar to go full screen. And I might as well just click that so I can only paint on that bit. And I've still got a texture mask on this brush. Let's get rid of that. There we are, finally. There must be a few overlapping seams here as well, which is a bit of a pain, really. So if I press X now, that will give me the black color. Hold down X, that is, and paint. Then that will paint the black back. And X again. Here's just press, sorry, not hold. Interestingly, the symmetry didn't work. It's probably because I've got a seam running down that, so if I link select that, it's not selecting the other side. You need what you're going to paint and symmetrize all selected. So it doesn't matter, I'll just do this side as well. Little bits like this don't really matter too much in this case. Excellent, let's bring back our node editor. Let's get rid of the mix now. And we can see it's all working pretty well, except for that blob there. But again, it doesn't make too much difference with the metallic shader. You can be a tiny bit rough with it. Okay, so that's fine for which bits are metal and which bits aren't. So let's save that image. Image, save image. That's great. Now what we need is the roughness, and this is a bit different. So yes, we do want this to be shiny, but we don't want it to be uniformly shiny, just have a big shiny piece of armor. We want a bit of variation to it. The same with the skin. Skin is actually slightly shiny, it's not completely rough, so we want a bit of shininess there, but again, we don't want it to be completely uniform across the body. Different bits are more shiny than others. So I find a good way to do this is to actually get back our cavity, which is this one just here. I'll just duplicate that and bring it over. I can get rid of I'll move our color back over here. I might need that mix shader in a second. And let's just bring that into the metallic. Just quickly see what that looks like. So I'll bring my color back. And now at the moment, we've still got an even roughness. I'll just put that to middle roughness. You can see the metallic bits are now looking metally, and the other bits are dielectric or non-metallic. But it's very uniform in terms of how shiny it is still. We want a bit bashed, and we want these bashed bits to have no shininess almost in the middle. And then the straps, we want shininess across the front here, but less down the sides, and so on. Okay, so let's move this right out of the way. I've got my color and my metallic set up now. Now I need this cavity to influence the roughness, because the cavities where the edges are white and the crevices are black will be suitable, because that's where shininess tends to happen on the edges, and it tends to be duller in the crevices. The problem is this is the wrong way round. And it would be a good idea to make a copy of this rather than to use the actual cavity at the moment. So the easy way to do this is to just go into an editing program like Photoshop and load up that image and invert it. So there it is, Warrior Cav, and here it is. And in Photoshop it's very simple. There is a filter down here and it's called Invert. Other programs, free programs like Critter, will be very similar. And it's just got an invert, it swaps everything around, and that should make the white bits now, which are the edge bits, are actually the crevices, and the darker bits will be the edges. So the shinier bits will be the darker bits. So let's save this. File, save as, and I'll just call it, instead of Warrior Cav, I'll call it Warrior Roughness, and just save that as a PNG. Let's go back to Blender, and in here we'll open our Warrior Roughness. So now when I hook that up to the roughness, let's go to rendered mode and press Shift Tab just on that one. So you can see the crevices are now rough, and the edges where it's a bit darker, they'll be shinier. So let's see what that looks like to start with. So Control Tab on there, and it's made everything really shiny. So what we will need to do, one, we can start off inside Photoshop or similar program and lighten it a bit so it has a bit more roughness, and then we can paint on some influence. So let's start in Photoshop. Let's just add another effects layer, and curves will do. Curves, you can just bring it down like this or bring it up like this for brightness. So just get the middle. This is all the channels. To get the middle, you can just use brightness and contrast if you want to find it easier. So I'm just going up so it's a bit rougher. Okay, save that. Back to Blender, reload the image in your UV image editor. Let's bring up our Warrior Roughness and image reload. There we go, a bit whiter, a bit brighter, and there it's a bit better, isn't it? Now, so you can see the shine, I have got the 3 lights set up, but even better to see glossiness and reflections, you really need an HDR just to guide you. So let's quickly do that in the World tab just here. Create a new world texture and just bring in an HDRI. I have got a video on this, which I'll put a link in the description, but hopefully it's something you know about anyway. So texture, environment texture, and hook that up, and then just find an HDR. HDR Labs is great, and HDR Haven is another great one. Okay, now we get a good idea of the shininess. Hopefully we can see some reflections in here, although not a great deal, because it's still fairly rough, which is kind of what I want really. I'm going to put the samples up a tiny bit as well. So over to the samples, just so it's a bit less grainy. So that's doing a reasonable job, but I would prefer to paint on some roughness as well and some glossiness. So let's go back to our object and click on the warrior roughness. We'll change this to texture, and I'm going to start painting areas with either a multiply or a screen brush. Then that won't damage the cavity mask too much, but it will lighten and darken areas and therefore make them rough or glossy. So first of all, I'll add a new brush and I'll call this texture brush. And I don't want it to be uniform, I want it to have a texture mask. Now texture mask I did sort of hint at in the other lesson just before this one. They're what the brush head will look like. Rather than texture, which is like a stencil, this is like your brush, like you'd expect to see in Photoshop. So if I create a new texture here, go across to the textures and just add a noise texture. So let's pick our brush texture and add in a noise. In fact, clouds would probably be better. There we go, clouds. Make them nice and big somewhere around there. And we'll start with soft. So obviously the light bits will be painted and the dark bits won't be. Might be a bit too big there. There we go, that's better. And you can change things like the depth here. The size is just there, which I was changing. And I can't even remember what this bit is. So I've got my warrior roughness selected. It's selected down here as well. I can always go to edit mode just to double check that. Edit mode and back, and it's definitely selected. And I've got texture paint on with texture selected. And I'm going to paint on a bit more roughness in areas. So let's start with the screen, which will make it whiter and therefore more rough. And I can use the link selection to select the skin areas. I'm going to select all the ankles as well. Even though I've got the straps in there, I can go to those a bit later on and add a bit of detail if I think it's necessary. Okay, so I've got all those selected, I think. So I must remember the darker bits are going to be rough, so I'll just make it slightly rougher around the place. Not so much on the nose though, but certainly in these sort of crevices around here and up in the forehead here. Bit of shine on the top of the eyebrows. Not sure I've given him eyebrows when I painted actually. Probably should do that. Rough within here and fairly rough on the chin and neck, as if he's got some light hairs there stopping the shininess. Rougher at the bottom of the legs where there's more hair than the top. I have got symmetry turned on, of course, so I forgot to mention that. Backs are fairly shiny, but maybe around these crevices here, just make those rough. The more you notice it is in the metal, so I'll come to that in a second. Now I want this sort of trunk leather to be quite rough, so I'll deselect all and I'll make that a fair bit whiter. Can you see the screen brush isn't affecting too much the highlights there, because it's making everything together more rough. Alt F to center your brush, remember. And every now and again you want to save your image and quickly nip across to render mode with the principal shader selected and see what it's looking like. Just track around your image a bit. Let's work on the metal now and see what that looks like. Oh, I've got mirror selected. Keep doing that. Be careful of that. You can see it's mirrored to the other side. Need to get rid of that and turn mirror off. There's a tiny bit of a glitch there. That must have been some sort of overlapping UV or something. But I'm not going to let it worry me too much at this stage. Shouldn't really be seen. Okay, and let's make it quite rough in these sort of areas in here. And I'm just going to add a sort of bit of variation across the helmet. I feel like my size of my noise or clouds needs to calm down just a touch. There we go. Watch out for little glitches like that. They do happen occasionally. Now I am making this quite rough, so what I'm going to do is go across to the multiply brush now. So multiply just there, bring the darkness down. So this is going to be quite shiny across here. There's going to be these sort of shiny bits. And a lot of shine around the edges. Of course the cavity map is doing some of the work, but I'm just kind of helping it along. So you can just plug the cavity mask in and get a pretty good result, but I just want to make this that touch better. Hopefully it is making it better. Now if I remember rightly, you don't really need to be too subtle with this. It's surprising how far you can go with this, but we'll see in a second when I actually go to test it. It's quite an anomaly there actually. I don't really like that, but I'll put up with it for now. It's okay on that side, but that side's a bit awful. Might need to just go in and edit that later. Okay, hopefully I haven't gone too far here, but I might have done. So let's check it. Okay, so it's working okay. It's not amazing. We should see a bit of light reflection, and you can see the inconsistencies in the reflection. That's quite nice. But I might need a touch more roughness perhaps in some areas. Ideally what you want to do is move your light around, and that should show the differences. A render engine like Eevee would be good for this because it's a bit more of an instant render then, rather than cycles, or doing it in something like Substance Painter is much easier. But you can see the reflections and how there is a difference and variation within the reflections, and that's what we're going for. Down here it's quite consistent, and up here in the helmet it's a lot better. Possibly a bit too dark in places, so I'm going to change that slightly now. Okay, and every now and again, save, go across to rendered mode. Now you can see the roughness coming through there. I feel like I need a bit of a difference though, so maybe more difference in the dark and light. So maybe changing this to hard and seeing how that works. What we could try as well, instead of clouds, we could try a different one like Vernois, I think it's called. Probably not though, probably getting that wrong. See how we get on with that. And you'll need to test, this will come down to experience, and you can see that I need a bit more practice with this to see the different levels, but it's just trial and error until you get it right. And I'm going between screen and multiply basically. The other thing you might want to think about is changing the texture mask to random rather than tiled. If you do tiled, it will just do an exact tile all the way around, whereas random is exactly as it says on the tin. It does a more random shape. So I'm going to vary it a bit more just out of interest, and you can kind of see my experiments a bit then. So I think that's where my seam is, and I keep getting glitched there. I'm just going to avoid it for the moment. I know it's a bit naughty just to leave it, but at this stage, rather than tidying up any seams, I'm just going to add more variation. Okay, so we can notice a bit more now. And across here especially, you can't see it that well, but this is certainly more reflective. And once we get it into a different sort of game engine, that should be a bit more effective than what we're seeing in cycles, because it's not rendering quick enough. Okay, I'll continue with the shoulder pads. I'll speed things up now with the time lapse. So a couple of quick tips that I've learnt. You can go quite extreme and get quite a difference in roughness and shininess, and it looks quite good. in my opinion. It does depend a lot on your experience, but the more you practice this sort of thing, the better it will be. Always remember, at this late stage, you probably can't use mirror so much because you're trying to create asymmetry more. I do have a Patreon, it's in the description if you do want to support me. Okay, so there we have it, our completed and painted Spartan warrior with PBR textures. If there's enough interest, I'll go on to rigging and a bit of animation perhaps. Let me know in the comments if you're interested. Hope you enjoyed the series. Thanks very much for all the feedback, it's really appreciated. And in future I'll do some more series like this if people would like. Lastly, you can purchase this model on Sketchfab. All the links are in the description. Thanks for watching.